guys, it's Olivia and welcome back to Live in Literature. Thank you so much for all the love and support I received on my last video, and if you have not seen it yet, feel free to head on over to my channel to check it out. Well guys, we're gonna hop right into it today. As you've seen from today's video title, we are talking about giving authors a second chance. Now, as many of you know, I have very strong and strict opinions about my authors and the people I choose to read from.
You talk too much. You're opinionated. You're stubborn, sarcastic, and stuck up.
Ergo, Miss SJM, Miss Amy Harmon, Miss V.E. Schwab, to name a few of my favorites who never miss. But sometimes, I will say, authors have a miss. Sometimes they have a slip up. Sometimes they don't always hit their mark.
Why can't you understand? It was a mistake.
And even my favorites, Miss SJM included, which I don't like to talk about, have a couple slip ups. They're not all winners. Even Sarah J. Maas, I'd say that she's all winners. But regardless,
I knew you'd say that.
not every author is going to be entirely all winners. And there are some authors that I've either A, written off my list or just been like, I don't know if I ever want to read another book from them. And I have decided to I gave a bunch of these other authors, I've read all these books fairly recently, and I've given many of these authors a second chance, quote unquote, to impress me, wow me. Let me see what you're really made of, to see if it's really worth my time to go back and read the stuff that you're writing.
I'm not easily impressed.
Because I'll be honest, once I make my mind up about something, I'm usually pretty set. But who knows? Maybe they've changed my mind. I've read several books by many authors. I've got about like 5 or 6 here for you today to talk about. From some authors that I do love, but have had some misses in the past, or some authors that I've never liked, and we'll see if they've impressed me enough to continue reading what they've been writing.
Hey, I'm a compassionate insect, so you can all just try again.
Regardless of your guys' opinions, whether you like these authors or not, these are just my opinions, so there's no way, I hope it doesn't offend anyone. This is just what I think personally. For me, some of these authors, like, they're not my favorite, or they are and they've had some misses or they've had some hits. You're going to hear my opinions about it today, so I hope you'll join me on giving these authors a second chance. Let's get started. The first one I want to talk about, this author I talked about in my 2023 most anticipated reads, my 2024 most anticipated reads. This was a book that I was so anticipating for 2024, and that is A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faizal. Now, if you watched that video, I talked about how Hafsa Faizal wrote We Hunt the Flame, and the other one, her in the duology, We Hunt the Flame. I'll be honest, I didn't like it. I didn't even end up finishing the second one. I read the first one and I thought that it was okay. Like, I just didn't think it would wowed me. And I also didn't like the misrepresentation of tropes in that book. It's marketed as an enemies to lovers, but really it's just like an insta-love. There's not really an enemies to lovers motion really going on there. It's more just like instant attraction, which I hate. Sorry.
Just as long as his you-know-what isn't crooked. I really hate that.
Anyway, so I was really looking forward to A Tempest of Tea because this book is marketed as like a Six of Crows, like heist vibes. If you haven't read Six of Crows, read Six of Crows. But it's marketed as like Six of Crows, heist vibes, vampires. There's like an underground speakeasy blood bank where like vampires come to like participate in some blood drinking like within the grounds of this speakeasy by this incredible owner. Like, it seemed totally up my alley because I am, as we all know, in my vampire era these days. I wanted to give Hafsa Faizal a second chance because I was not impressed with We Hunt the Flame, but a lot of people really liked that book. So I was like, okay, I'm going to read A Tempest of Tea. I read A Tempest of Tea. And I came to the same conclusion that I had about with We Hunt the Flame, which was, Hafsa Faizal, I think that you have such brilliant plot. I think you have brilliant plots in your head. I think you have incredible ideas for like what a book should be, and like incredible like knowledge and like background and giving background in these characters. But whoever your editor is, or if it's you, I don't know. I'm just assuming it's your editor. We're having a conversation, me and you right now, Miss Hafsa Faizal. Okay, you need to get a new editor.
Oh, that was way harsh, Ty.
Because I don't know what the deal is with all of your books. I just feel like every time I've read one of your books, it's very jumpy. It just jumps so quick between like POVs and between characters, and there's no like seamless transition of the story. It's like, oh, we're here, and the next chapter, oh, now we're here, oh, next chapter, now we're here, and it's like, there's no like seamless transition, like, how did we get here? What are the in-betweens? Same thing with the romances. I felt the romances were completely underdeveloped in this book, and at first I was like, wait a minute, is this a love triangle? Like, I don't know what's going on here. I was a little bit confused, which like...
What are you talking about?
But I just think that the writing is so disconnected from the characters. Like, I think the story has such heart and such like impact, but because of the way that it's written, I honestly just was like, I just wish it was written by someone else. Like, this is such a great story. I just feel like the writing is so jumpy and disconnected. I feel like the romances never like reached a crescendo and a climax for either of the relationships going on in here. And I just felt like there was so much underdevelopment going on oh my gosh. And even my biggest issue with this book was that all, like, I feel like in other fantasy books, or just in fantasy books in general, authors are so good about like essentially like leaving the clues to like keep you guessing of like what's going to be the plot twist. Whereas here, all of the plot twists happening in this book like were just instant and immediate. There were no like crumbs left throughout the path. It was just like, here it is. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, I'm so confused. How did we even get here? And it just feels like way too much of like a jumping reveal. It feels too like, it just feels disconnected and disjointed. Like there's no like connection in this book. So I don't know. I just feel like the book I feel like has such a great plot. I just feel like it's poorly written. Don't get me wrong. I still was like, I really enjoyed the ending and I still feel like it was impactful and it like made a difference. And I was like, oh wow, like this actually like, you know, has there's a really interesting story going on in here. And the characters are compelling. But I feel like it's too jumpy and disjointed, and I feel like the writing just like there's no flow and connection, and I just feel like things didn't like reach their full potential. So for me, I'm sorry, but Hops of Isles, A Tempest of Tea, I give it 3 stars. Like, that feels generous, maybe even 2.5, but like 3 stars feels like appropriate to me. I still feel like it's a really interesting world and a really interesting concept. Personally, for me though, it just did not like hit the mark for me. Like, I just felt like it was still disappointing. So I don't know if I don't know if I'm going to read book 2. I might, honestly, because of the way this one ends, like I might read book 2. But this was my chance to give Hops of Isle a second chance. And I'll be honest, she kind of let me down. I was really hoping for excellence and I really didn't get it with this book.
Simba, I'm very disappointed in you.
But you can all go form your own opinions about A Tempest of Tea. Next, moving on to one of my most favorite authors, but also one who's had some like iffy stuff in the past. We have A Fragile Enchantment by Miss Allison Saft. I talked a couple years ago about A Far Wilder Magic by Miss Allison Saft. A Far Wilder Magic, for me, was one of the best YA fantasy, like historical fantasies written. I think it was in 2021. It was one of the best written, or in 2022, I can't remember. But regardless, it was one of the best written. Like, I was so in love with it. But before Allison Saft published that one, she posted a book called Down Comes the Night. And I remember reading that one and like kind of getting into like the gothic fantasy vibes. It was supposed to be kind of like gothic Victorian like fantasy vibes. And it just didn't hit for me. I was kind of like, oh, this is cute, but like it's just a cute story. Like it's not really like impacting me. It's not moving me. I'm not like loving it.
That's true. I'm not a big fan of
So I was kind of iffy. And then I read A Far Wilder Magic. And my whole world changed because I was like, oh my gosh, I will read anything Allison Saft writes. Because A Far Wilder Magic was so good and it was so well written and it was so magical and the romance was incredible and the plot was amazing and I loved it. And then we have A Fragile Enchantment. And I assumed by the plot, it was supposed to be like almost like a Bridgerton style fantasy novel, but also like with magic and like leaning into like garden and like earth powers, which I really, really liked. And a really interesting female character named Neve. And it was supposed to lean a lot into like Irish folklore. And I was really intrigued. I was like, oh my gosh, Irish folklore. We've got garden magic. It's like Bridgerton vibes. So it's really like Regency era like vibes. And again, I really was disappointed by this one. It kind of gave me a similar energy to Down Comes the Night, where I was like, oh, this is like a cute story, but it's not like moving me. It's not impacting me the way that like A Far Wilder Magic did. I feel like the book is a very cute concept. It's like about a young woman named Neve who comes over from her island to essentially dress the groom of the royal family. He's getting married and it's like the brother of the Duke. He's getting married and he hates her because he's like, I don't want to get married and I don't want you here. Anyways, they end up like falling for each other. but there's also like political uprising happening with like the people from Neve's country and nation. And then there's also stuff going on with like family drama and issues with like the garden magic going on like in this estate, essentially. So like really fun plot, but I will just say like I felt like it was like kind of short-lived. I felt like the plot twists were easy and too like easy to figure out. I kind of disappointed. It was a little lackluster. The book didn't totally move me, so I don't know. I was kind of giving Alison Saft a second chance to like change my mind about her, because like we had Down Comes the Night, which was not very good, and then we had A Far Wilder Magic, which was amazing. And so this one was kind of a toss-up of like, oh, what are we gonna get, amazing or bad? And it just wasn't very good.
What a tough audience.
Mediocre at best. I gave it 3 stars. It's okay. It's not moving me. It's really cute, but like it's not one that I'm going to be like out of my way recommending to people. This is just my opinion about A Fragile Enchantment. Now we have an author that is very popular in the fantasy world and in just like one of the most famous authors, I would say, in the world in general. And someone that I will be honest, like I've never liked. And I will own that. I will own that I never liked Mr. Brandon Sanderson.
What? No. No. What?
I tried to read Brandon Sanderson when I was younger. I tried to read, I read Mistborn, and I was kind of like, which like a lot of people love the Mistborn trilogy. So like, I feel like I'm the uncommon denominator in that one. I feel like Mistborn is a very well-beloved series, and people really, really like it. For me, it just wasn't like my cup of tea. Brandon Sanderson, to be honest, like I don't love the way that he writes. I just feel like there's a lack of connection in his book with like character connection. I feel like his books are very like plot driven and very like fantasy driven and very just like in the world driven. Whereas I am more for like, I prefer like a slightly more character driven story, as well as something that's like a little bit more impactful in that way. So I wanted to give Brandon Sanderson a chance because I've really never given him like a proper go. And I was like, okay, I'll pick up one of his like essentially like a YA fantasy novel, which is Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. And this one was supposed to be like a dystopian, like almost like sci-fi, like world bending about a young woman who lives on one planet, but this boy who's a nightmare painter, essentially he like kills nightmares by like drawing them into like paper and like getting rid of them. And they end up like connecting and clashing over like centuries long, and they don't even realize it. And it turns into a mystery, and it's very cute. It is very cute, but I will say,
She said I'm cute. Ha!
The one thing that I was really bugged by in this book, and that I've seen that he does a lot in his YA fantasy or his YA books, is that he makes himself a character. Like Brandon Sanderson makes himself a character. Like he talks about himself as if he's a character in the book. Like he's the narrator. So he is like, hey, I'm narrating the book, and I'm going to tell you about Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. And he's like, and this is what the world is like. He's like, but then it's also not like that. It just feels a little bit kitschy. It feels a little bit 2010. It feels a little bit like, I don't know. It feels like me writing a story when I'm in the 6th grade and I'm like, oh, but you'll never guess. Like, I'm the narrator and this was all a dream. Like it kind of gives that vibe.
Ew, this is so cringe. Guilty.
Don't get me wrong, I actually think the plot twist of the book is really interesting, and I thought the characters were very cute and very compelling. Like a really, really like interesting, well thought out universe and a really well thought out story. I just don't like the idea of making yourself a character in your own book, like as a narrator. Like I know authors probably base characters like off of themselves and like what they've been through, which I love. I love that, but it's not like, and me, the author, narrating. It's giving like Lemony Snicket, which don't get me wrong, like Lemony Snicket, like those books are very fun and well beloved, and I think that I think it was a great idea for its time. It's just not my favorite thing. And Brandon does this in this book, and it's not my favorite thing. I just feel like it's a little bit odd, and it just wasn't my favorite. So to be honest, my opinions about Brandon Sanderson have kind of been the same. Like I think that he is really talented for a certain type of person who enjoys that kind of literature. For me, I'm not that person. I'm not the target audience for this. So for me, I don't like Brandon Sanderson. I just think that it's not my vibe. I just don't think it's my vibe. I don't think it's my energy. But I gotta give him credit where credit is due. Like he has written a ton of amazing fantasy books, and people really, really seem to like him. So for those of you who love Brandon Sanderson, go off, kings and queens, like pop off. Y'all do you, because I'm happy for you. But for me, this was a 3-star read. It was cute, but it didn't move me in the way that I want a book to move me. Next, I want to talk about one of my favorite authors. And once again, very similarly to Alison Saft, this author had like a really incredible book and then like a really mediocre book. And so I was a little bit nervous to be trying out this one. But I will say this was this author's first time doing a YA Gothic fantasy, and that is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. Now, this book came out last year, and Ava Reed has only done like very gothic, dark fantasy books in the adult genre. She wrote The Wolf and the Woodsman, and then she wrote Juniper and Thorn. And I loved Wolf and the Woodsman. That was a very much like, that was like a political, like witches, gothic fantasy, very dark and spooky, but also like a gorgeous romance. I really enjoyed that one. That was supposed to be like a political, like, plot. And then Juniper and Thorn was really confusing for me, and I didn't love that book. I feel like it just missed the mark. I feel like the plot was really like, I don't know, it reached like kind of a level of gross for me that I don't normally delve into, and I didn't love that. And I also just don't think it was like the most well-written thing that Ava Reed has ever written, especially when she has this like gorgeous, like feasting, like political intrigue and like witches and cultural like phenomenon that is The Wolf and the Woodsman. So I was a little bit interested to see what Ava Reed was going to do with a YA Gothic fantasy, and I will say she really hit the mark. So A Study in Drowning is basically about a young woman named Effie Sayre who is a architect at an architectural college, but she's the only woman. She's received discrimination for being the only woman, and a lot of other things that have happened to her, which like as a woman like can relate. I love this woman, like can relate.
Who can relate? Ooh.
Feel her entirely. She gets an opportunity to go and essentially rebuild like a famous author that she's like loved for all these years, like house. And when she's there, she discovers another student named Preston Hellery, who's essentially like a journalist, is trying to uncover a mystery about this author that she loves so much. And they end up working together. And so this is kind of like almost a historical fantasy, like kind of the same vibes as like Divine Rivals energy. I really loved A Study in Drowning. It was a very cute YA Gothic moment. I will say that like it's a 4.5 stars, like really, really, really well done. It's not like my most favorite thing that I've like ever read, but 4.5 stars because the writing is so incredible. It's very spooky vibes. I say the romance was really well written and very cute. I loved the enemies to lovers. I loved the like academics of it all. There were a lot of like academic moments in here, which like I've really been enjoying the academic genre of like dark academia. I would throw this book in the genre of dark academia. Really, really well done. And I will say Ava Reed really kind of turned it out for me. I was a little bit nervous after Juniper and Thorn. This really turned it out for me. And I really think that like Ava Reed should stick to like more of these like dark academia books and like in this genre. Granted though, I love her adult stuff. I hope she continues to write more adult stuff. But I really enjoyed this YA like Gothic fantasy. I 10 out of 10 recommend everyone give this one a go. It's really fun if you're looking for something a little dark and spooky. Okay, guys, next one I want to talk about is by an incredible author who, I will be honest, when her first book dropped, I was skeptical. I didn't like it. I didn't think she was going to be very good. And I've raved about this book. I think this was my top favorite book of 2021 when it came out. My favorite book of 2021. It was absolutely incredible. And that is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. So Margaret Owen, I will say, her first book that dropped was called The Merciful Crow. I read it. I hated it. I thought it was terrible. I thought it was really poorly written. I felt like there was no plot. I felt like there was nothing happening in the book. I was bored to tears reading A Merciful Crow.
I'm bored.
Hi, bored. Nice to meet you.
And I told myself I was never going to give her another chance. And then she dropped Little Thieves. Oh my gosh. Little Thieves is one of my most recommended YA fantasy books. From its incredible story, from its political intrigue, from its absolutely most dynamic, disgusting, witty, comical characters, it's exactly what you want it to be from a YA fantasy. Essentially, the book is about a young woman named Vanya Schmidt who grows up poor and penniless, and she is essentially a maid for a young woman named Giselle, who's like a famous like aristocrat in this time. It's very like Russian fantasy vibes as well. So like Russian fantasy. Anyways, one day, Vanya gets the great idea to steal these magic pearls that Giselle wears to make herself beautiful and look amazing. Like they have magic pearls. She steals them and leaves Giselle out on the streets, penniless and poor, and Vanya essentially like steals her riches and steals her life. A year later, Vanya is cursed by one of the gods, in this like pantheon of gods in this world. She's cursed, and she's got 2 weeks to figure out how to break her curse, but also she wants to keep the money that she's inherited so far. So Vanya is very much like anti-hero. She's very cunning and very sneaky and very conniving, and I love her. She's just so like dynamic. I want to eat her up. And then you meet these like incredible cast of characters who is trying to like solve this mystery and figure out who Vanya is and like what is Vanya doing and what she's going to do about the gods that are after her. I just love Little Thieves. I think it's such a well-written fantasy. I absolutely adore it. Margaret Owen has completely blown me away with this franchise, the Little Thieves franchise. Like, I think it's one of the most well-written YA fantasies ever. This is a 5-star read. It's an incredible book. I cannot recommend it enough. Everyone's got to give this one a chance. So that is all the books that I have to recommend for you guys today. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the Live in Literature YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining me here on giving authors a second chance. I think we had some wins and some loses. Some authors, I don't know if I'm ever going to pick up a book from them again. And some I'm definitely going to keep picking up. So I hope you'll check out all those books. I just want to leave a quick reminder that I leave the links for all these books down in the description. So if you want to purchase them, feel free to click on the links and follow those so you can get those books. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye!